Okay, so this mini lecture is going to talk about some basic information on adolescent nutritional needs and also on the onset of eating disorders. Okay, so what's contributing to all of the physical growth in adolescence? Well, nutrition is going to be key because remember, we're gaining all of those inches in height and all of those pounds across puberty. And so you have an increase in calorie needs as well. Boys need 2,700 calories a day, and girls need 2,200 calories a day during the growth spurt. But the most common problem in adolescence is nutritional deficiency. Think back, right, to when you were an adolescent, which for a lot of you won't have been very long ago, and you probably didn't treat yourself very well in terms of nutrition. You probably didn't eat very well. You tended to eat less fruits, vegetables, less dairy products. You probably skipped breakfast, and you consumed a lot of soda and fast food. And that's not so good in terms of maintaining good nutrition. And so, what you have in adolescence is a lot of iron and vitamin deficiencies. Now, the one thing that can really help, of course, is having mealtime with family. And interestingly, mealtime with family helps not only in terms of nutritional balance, but helps in terms of psychological adjustment during adolescence as well. Now, I hinted before that we will often see the onset of eating disorders in adolescence, and we do. We see the onset of disorders like anorexia and bulimia. And a lot of what we know about these eating disorders, we know about girls. And it's not because these disorders only happen in girls, but it's because we just haven't studied boys very much yet when it comes to these eating disorders. Now, just the difference, anorexia nervosa is where the individual starves themselves out of fear of getting fat. It's a compulsive fear of getting fat. You have about 1% of teenage girls in the United States affected by anorexia. Now, boys of that 1% account for about 10% of all anorexia cases, and that's the boys that we know about. Okay. You also have some differences across racial and ethnic groups in the incidence of anorexia, so that Caucasian, Asian, and Hispanic American girls are at greater risk for anorexia than African American girls. And research suggests that if you show girls that are participating in a study a range of body types, and you ask them, "What is your body type?" and then you also ask them, "What is your ideal body type?" African American girls tend to be more realistic, both in terms of what their actual body type is, and that's more matched to what their ideal body type is. So they tend to be happier with body types, and their ideal body types are significantly larger than the other three groups that I mentioned before. So there is this sort of difference. There's something culturally different in terms of how thinness and body type is being regarded in these different cultural groups. Now, um, those with anorexia tend to have an extremely distorted body image. Even after they've become severely underweight, they will tend to see themselves as being very overweight. And in an attempt to be perfectly thin and to be satisfied, anorexics will lose sometimes between 25 and 50% of their body weight and will appear painfully thin. And it's very hard on their body. They will not menstruate, right? Because you need to have at least 15% body fat to menstruate. And this can cause other problems like risk for osteoporosis because you're not producing as much estrogen if you're not menstruating. And then it can also result in the shrinking of the heart muscle and kidney failure. You have about 6% of girls dying from the disorder. Um, in terms of bulimia, this involves strict diet and exercise and often involves binging and purging. And purging can include things like vomiting, but also use of laxatives and excessive exercise. And vomiting can be really harmful to the body too, right? You can ruin enamel on your teeth. You can cause life-threatening damage to your throat and stomach. It's a little bit more common than anorexia. You have about 2 to 3% of teenage girls affected. Um, like anorexics, there's this pathological fear of getting fat. Um, and interestingly, across both eating disorder types, the girls tend to be good kids. They tend to be perfectionistic. They tend to be high achievers, but they also tend to have parents that have really high expectations for achievement, and they tend to be a little bit overprotective and controlling. So what happens in a lot of times is that the child starts to feel like eating and food is the only thing they can control, and so that becomes associated with control, and then you have these problems arise like anorexia and bulimia. One thing I would recommend, you see the link at the bottom of this slide. Um, it's a program on anorexia and bulimia and talks about all of the cutting edge research in these areas, and it's very interesting.